Hey, apparently I'm live. So here's the deal. It is currently 9:21 a.m. Pacific time. If it is not that time on your clock, then what you want to do is scrub to either, whoop, there it is, scrub to that when it gets to 0, or if there's something right here, then click on that because that'll take you to the edited show. If nothing's there, scrub to this, or if you're watching live, then just wait for it to hit 0, and the show will begin. Greetings, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Let's get that clock back up there. Greetings. How y'all doing? Did you have a good Monday? Good Monday. Today's Monday. Did you have a good weekend? That's what I really want to know. How was your weekend? Who all woke up this morning like, seriously, this whole time, stupid zone change, what do you call it, daylight savings time thing? This has got to end. I know in Europe you guys did it, at least parts of Europe you did it a week ago. How messed up is that? Not only is this whole daylight saving time totally screwy, it's done in different days in different places around the world. So I had a meeting last week with someone in France, and it's normally 9 hours ahead, and suddenly there's a 10-hour difference. It's like, God, just, please, can we just end this whole thing already? Can we just, somebody running on that platform, and you'll get my vote. Just get rid of this whole thing. Oh, my goodness. Trevor says, no way, the extra hour was awesome. You do know you lost an hour 6 months ago, right? Just saying. No, it's just insanity. It's insanity. Okay, so here's a question, I should make a poll for this. If we were to get rid of it, which time zone would be the right one? Which one do you stick with? The way it is now or the way that it was? For those of us who live in the northern parts of the region where we have very, very short days at this point in the year, would you rather have light in the morning when you get up and go to work or school, or light in the afternoon when you come home from work or school? Like now I know when I go home, it's dark. There's no playing outside, but it also means I can run earlier in the morning. So, because I can't run when it's dark, because we have cougars. Like seriously, we have cougars. There have been many, many sightings lately, including a ripped to shreds deer just down the road from me, which is like, I'm not gonna run in the dark. That sounds like a really bad idea. Ryan says you only lose an hour if you don't plan ahead. Great, your boys woke up at 5. Yeah, right, Sean? Exactly, the kids, they don't know. You can't explain that to them. Stuart says the DST times used to be aligned. It was the US that changed a few years back. Really? God, figures. It's just us. Early sunrise +1. I like the early sunrise too. I like having light in the mornings. I do. Stuart says the EU is planning to get rid of DST next year. Really? It will go forward in the spring and then remain static from that point forward. Really? I did not know that. Oh, that is brilliant. That is very good to hear. Okay, now if we could just get our government on board with that, we would be set. Let's see here. I got to swap this cable out now. That's awesome. I hadn't heard that yet. Huh, news to me. And Sean had a bear wake you up destroying the garbage can 2 nights ago. Yeah, that's why we have the bear-proof garbage can. You have to have it, or else you have a mess. Okay, let's get the show on the road. Sean, not Sean. Who's in the other room? Ryan. See ya. Anyway, Ryan, hit record, will you? I'm going to start recording in here. Get the recording going. It's going. We're good. We're live. We're showing. We're going to have a show. We are. Oh, hey, heads up. So we're going to do a portion of the show where I'm going to be switching through, looking through this camera. You're going to see stuff that's slightly out of sync because of the nature of that delay. If you don't understand why that is and you want to know, ask me in the Q&A. I'll be happy to bring it up. But I am going to proceed through the show as if it is in sync. It's a very slight out of sync, and I will fix that in post for the edited show. But for those of you watching live, which is obviously everybody who's here now, you will see a slight out of sync when I go to there. Don't worry, I know. And again, if you want me to explain why, I will happily do that in the Q&A. Just ask. All right, shall we have a show? Let's have a show. Yeah, okay. Good, we're ready. Let's do this thing. Where's my button? Probably should get my button up. There it is. Okay. On today's show, we're going to talk about how totally mechanical, manual, contactless lenses work when you're shooting with mirrorless cameras. Good morning, happy Monday, and welcome to PhotoJoseph's Photo Moment, the first live 3 times a week show here at youtube.com/PhotoJoseph, talking about all things photography, video, occasionally live streaming, and yeah, kind of anything related to that. Today we are talking about shooting with totally mechanical lenses, a lens that has no contacts on it, no communication between the lens and the camera. And the reason we're doing this is this had come up in the comments a while ago. Someone was asking about how does the camera know what aperture the lens is set to when it can't communicate. And it was the question that at first kind of confused me, but then I realized, oh, this thought process has probably evolved from shooting with mirrored cameras and not really adapted to mirrorless. So here's the deal. When you're shooting with a mirrored camera, or standard DSLR, the camera doesn't know what the aperture is unless the lens can tell it, or until the time of exposure. Right, when the mirror flips up and the sensor can read the actual exposure. The reason for this is the meter that you're looking, that is metering the scene on a mirrored camera, on a DSLR, is metering it, with the aperture wide open. Right, when you, on a mirrored camera, if you adjust the aperture on a electronic lens, so forget the mechanical lens for a moment, adjust the aperture on an electronic lens, the aperture doesn't actually close down. Right? The aperture never changes in the lens itself. If you look through the lens and you rotate it, it doesn't actually change. When you push the button to take the picture, then the aperture will close down. If you've had it set to close down, it'll close down and open back up again, and it does that for the actual exposure. But the lens is communicating to the camera, oh, I'm at f5.6, I'm at f8, I'm at f11, whatever it is, and the camera goes, okay, given the amount of light coming in, when we go to f8, the math means that there will be this much less light, and so the exposure has to adjust this way. So if you're shooting in, say, aperture priority, then the shutter speed is going to change to this, or if you're in auto ISO, the ISO is going to have to change to that. And the camera meters that, does the math, and it's obviously all instantaneous. It does the math and makes the adjustment where else it needs to. If you were to then take a lens like this, a totally mechanical lens, put it onto a mirrored camera, the camera has no idea what the aperture is set to. So when the shutter opens and suddenly there's a hole this big instead of a hole this big, the camera's like, oh crap, I have no idea what to do. You end up with an underexposed picture, which is why you generally are going to have to shoot manual when you're shooting that way, when you're shooting on a mirrored camera with a mechanical lens. But on mirrorless, because there is no mirror, hence the name, the sensor is constantly seeing the actual light coming through. When you close down the lens, the amount of light coming into the lens, reaching the sensor, is restricted, and the sensor can adjust virtually in real time so that you are getting a proper exposure, and you never have to do the math to figure out what it is. You don't have to go into full manual mode. You can still shoot in a semi-automatic mode when you're shooting with mechanical lenses on a mirrorless camera. It's really kind of a cool thing. And then also because we get the image on the sensor in real time all the time, we have something called focus peaking, which allows us to see very, very critically what's in focus. And we're going to look at both of these things in real time. We're going to take a look through this camera here. I've got it set up so I can adjust it, and you can see what we're actually seeing. But before we do that, let me take a close look at this lens so you see exactly the difference here. So here is a mechanical lens. You can see there are no contacts, right? If I grab a modern lens on there, you've got the contacts on there that are going to communicate to the camera what the lens settings are. And this is not just what the aperture is, it's what the lens model is, it's this lens serial number, it's all kinds of extra information that is passed through, whereas when you don't have those contacts, the camera effectively just thinks there is no lens. It doesn't know the difference between there being no lens or one of these on here. And when I adjust the aperture on this, looking through it, you can actually see the aperture closing down, which is something you're not going to get on an electronic lens. That doesn't happen until you actually push the button to take the picture. Now, incidentally, if you were to take a lens like this, a standard electronic lens, put it onto a DSLR camera, the one time that it does close down for you is when you hit that depth of field preview. That's when that does close down, and then you see what the depth of field will look like. But at least last time I checked, and to be fair, it's been a while since I shot mirrored cameras, you will see a much darker scene because it is actually restricting the amount of light. There's no way for the system to kind of gain that up to show you something brighter. Whereas on a mirrorless camera, since you don't, well, first of all, you don't even have to stop it down when you're on a manual lens, but you can still do that with electronic lenses. You can do the depth of field preview. It'll stop it down for you so you see what's in focus, what that depth of field preview actually is. But the cool thing on mirrorless is it automatically gains it up, it brightens it up so that you still see the thing as a proper exposure. Kind of neat, a little bit of a side note there, but it's kind of a cool side effect of that. So anyway, so on a lens like this, when we mechanically move the aperture, close it down, it literally restricts the amount of light coming in, and the sensor adjusts for that automatically. So that's what we're going to see here. So let's switch to looking through this system here. Let me actually pop this lens off here, put this one on in just a moment. And let's switch over and see what we've got here. Okay, so I'm looking at another system here, another screen. I am wide open right now, and I'm going to focus. And using focus peaking, I will know when I'm in focus. And you can see the focus peaking, how cool this is. Especially on the beard, it really works out well. And focus peaking, by the way that it works is it's looking for contrast, really high contrast. The areas of totally highest contrast possible is where it's going to put the red. In this case, red will change the color, and I'll show you how to do that. But you end up with this focus peaking. You can see these little lines, these little red lines or blue lines, whatever you set it to, so you see exactly what's in focus. And as I move, like right now, I'm just moving my body back and forth to move in and out of focus, or I can move the focus ring itself, of course. So as I said, I am wide open right now, and you can see really nice shallow depth of field in here, really nice bokeh. But as I close the lens down, as I start to close it, I'm going to close it slowly, and you're going to see the depth of field changing. But the exposure, you might see a little bit of a wiggle in the exposure, but then it quickly compensates and corrects itself. you see, look at that. Now I'm almost all the way stopped down. And the farther I get stopped down, the kind of longer it takes the camera to adjust. But there you can see I'm stopped down all the way. The background is largely in focus. I've lost that beautiful bokeh. And now I'm going to open it up very quickly, and you're going to see the exposure go bad, right, momentarily, but then the camera quickly adjusts for it. And if I slam it down the other way, close it, it goes too dark, and then it goes, oops, and it compensates for that. So the cool thing is if you're shooting video, you could actually adjust the exposure, adjust the aperture while you're shooting if you wanted to. Generally, it's not something you do, but you certainly can. So one of the things that you do have to be aware of is that you have something called, let me find the right setting here, the constant preview on. If I turn constant preview off, then we're no longer going to see the changes in here. So before I disable that, let me do this. I'm going to show you that I am in manual ISO. If you look at the ISO in the bottom right corner, you see it's set to 400 right now. I want that manual. I don't want to set this to automatic, so I'm going to leave that in manual. And obviously, we have no reading. So let's see here if I can point to where it would be. Right about there, you see the 0.0. That would be the aperture reading, but the camera doesn't know what the aperture is, so it just shows a 0. And then to the right of that, we are seeing, and unfortunately, it's one of those things I wish that number was always there. You see the shutter speed. It only shows up when I half press the shutter, even though it is constantly reading it. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to keep pressing that. If it disappears, I'll tap the shutter so it brings it back up again. But I'm wide open right now. I'm at an unknown aperture. I'm at an ISO of 400. That's right there. There's the ISO 400. And as I start to close it down, you can see the shutter speed. Bring it back up. You see the shutter speed changing to compensate as I close the aperture down, because I need, obviously, a longer and longer shutter speed. Open it back up again, and there we go. So now, for that to actually work properly, for you to actually see that exposure staying accurate, you do have to have the exposure preview turned on. And one of the cool things about this, too, one more thing before I turn that off, is if I do a manual exposure compensation, now you see right in the middle of the screen, I can go plus or minus on the exposure compensation. I can set the image to be brighter or darker, just depending on taste, whatever I actually want. Or if, the camera's metering off of some other part of it, I want to kind of compensate for that. But I'm not going to see any of that if this constant preview is not turned on. So if I turn this off right now, the camera is going to show me what it thinks is accurate. And it doesn't matter, even if I go to manual mode. So let me go to full manual exposure on here. There we go. We're in full manual right now. And now look, it says 0.02 of a second. That's where I last left it. It still looks like a proper exposure. Clearly, that is not a proper exposure right now. And if I was to go in and turn constant preview back on, we're going to see it look very, very dark. The problem, there we go. So that's what it would look like with that setting. I need to manually, there we go, manually adjust the exposure, adjust the shutter speed to make it proper. And so the whole point there, that constant preview, the idea behind having that on is the camera is showing you what the exposure will actually look like. And you might be wondering, why would you ever turn it off? The main reason you would want that off is if you're shooting in a studio environment. Imagine, if you will, that I'm shooting in here in the studio with studio strobes, and I'm going to set my camera to, I don't know, 1/25 of a second, F whatever, ISO whatever. That 1/25 of a second is assuming that the strobe is firing. When the strobe is not firing, then the image that the camera would capture would be really, really dark. If constant preview is turned on, I would see a really dark image. So by turning it off, then you see a correct exposure no matter what the camera is set to, that's when you need it. Okay, so that's that part of it. Now let's take a look at the actual focus peaking settings. Let's see if I can find that. I'm reaching behind the camera to do this, which is very tricky, by the way. Where did it go? I knew I had it here somewhere. I knew where it was earlier, and now I've lost it. Let's see here. Nope, that's not it. This is very hard to do backwards. Let me just point that out. Where did it go? I've probably gone past it 5 times. I'm trying to look in the back of look at another monitor while doing this. Is making it a little bit tricky. I got totally in the wrong area. Here we go. Monitor display, constant preview. There is focus peaking. Okay, let me get back over here. And there we go. Okay, so I found focus peaking. There we go. When we go in here, we see that is on or off. And if I turn it off, then obviously we're going to lose the focus peaking. So when you're doing manual, it's something you probably want on. But you also have these settings in here. Let's drop down to this. And you have 2 detect levels, low and high. If I set it to high, then it is a much more critical focus required. You see the color changes, but not as much. So look at my beard. There's not anywhere near as much red as there was before. If we go to low, we're going to see a lot more of that. So basically the difference there is how critical the focus has to be. It's looking for a less critical focus when you're on low, which is fine if you're shooting at, I don't know, say f4 or something like that, but if you're gonna shoot wide open on a lens like this one on here, which is f0.95, that focus is really critical. And even though, like at this point, if you look at my eye that's closer to the scene, so that's probably, yeah, that's gonna be totally sharp. But as I move forward just a little bit, we still have some of the red sparkles on my eye, but that is probably not in focus, is it? So there's definitely a difference in there where having that set to that high point is probably a good idea. And then you can change the color. So let's go to color here, and for whatever, you know, if you're shooting something that's got a lot of red in it, then seeing the red focus peaking is not gonna be easy to see, so you can change that color on there. So that's basically how that works. So you have this difference where you've got the focus peaking, allowing you to measure that critical focus based off of the contrast in the scene. And if you're thinking, wait, isn't that kind of like contrast detection autofocus? Yes, it's exactly what it is. It is the camera looking for those areas of the highest contrast, and in this case, highlighting them. And then the exposure itself is adjusted automatically because the sensor is seeing the light coming through the scene in real time, all the time. So that's pretty much all there is to it. It's kind of fun, kind of cool. So if you get any questions about this, we're going to jump into the Q&A next. Before I do that, I want to remind you guys that we do have, one of the best ways to support this show is to go to photojoseph.com/member. And if you become a member there, you get access to all kinds of cool stuff, including a private Facebook group that is just for members only, where we can, I'm much more likely to be able to respond to questions on there. Someone had asked a question about their GH5 the other day, and I was able to help them right away through that. And it's a place where I will be going live occasionally, kind of randomly while I'm, I don't know, in the back of a Uber or something like that, and I can just kind of go live and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. So it's one of the new benefits to membership there. So I encourage you to please go check that out. For now, though, it is time for the live Q&A. So if you're watching live, make sure you get your questions in there, put @PhotoJoseph in front of them. And if you're not watching live, just drop your question in anytime into the comments, and I will do my best to get to them. See you in a minute. Greetings and welcome back to PhotoJoseph's Photo Moment. We are here to talk about the Q&A. We're here to talk about the Q&A. We're here to Q in the A. Well, I have no idea. We're just talking about using mechanical lenses on mirrorless cameras, how exposure works, how focusing works, and now I'm here to answer any questions you might have, or at least I will make an attempt to do it. So let's see what's going on over here in the chat room. Bring the comments up on the screen. And Jake, good morning to you. Elastic holsters. I'm not quite sure where that was going, but we'll leave that alone. All right. Marco says, I would really appreciate it if you could put the focus of your shows a bit more in the direction of streaming and streaming equipment again. I haven't done a show on streaming in a while. So Marco, the whole thing of the show is it's all about photography, video, and of course live streaming being the third part of that. And really the only reason I talk about live streaming is because you kind of need a camera to do it. And because this is a live show, so I do have a bit of experience on it. You want another show on live streaming? It's been a while since I've done one on live. Give me some specifics of what you want to know about in live, and I will try to tailor a show to you. Sir says, peaking's detect level should have been named sensitivity. That makes more sense. I get it. I totally agree. The high and low is a weird thing, like high sensitivity, low, what does that actually mean? So yeah, detect level would be a better way to put that. But once you play with it, you kind of get it. You know what it is. You go, okay, now I get it. But yeah, you're not wrong. You are not wrong. Bing N, do you use auto ISO for the GH5? If so, do you set a limit for max ISO? Excellent question. So when I'm shooting video, I would say I go back and forth maybe 50-50. So if I am just total run and gun, I know that I want my shutter angle to be 180 degree, or if I'm shooting on like the G9, doesn't have shutter angle 60th of a second, I know that I want that, right? So I'm gonna leave that solid. I'm not gonna change that unless I absolutely have to. The aperture, I'm almost always going to shoot wide open because I want a little bit of shallower depth of field, so that is fixed, which means the only thing left to change is the ISO, unless I have a neutral density filter on there. So if I'm shooting, yeah, actually I would say even with an ND filter on there, if I am just kind of run and gun and I just don't want to have to think about it, or I just want the camera to be ready when I pull it out of the bag and not have to even pretend to change any settings, then I'll leave it in auto so that it is just ready to go. I push the button and it's recording, and the exposure is going to be accurate. And if I want to make a change at that point, even while it's recording, I can do that, right? I can make that change. If I'm being more deliberate about it, so it's not a vlog style run and gun, I'm actually out shooting something, in that case, I am going to go manual ISO. And I will probably, well, I will go as close to the native ISO as I can. So in the case of like the GH5S, you've got a native ISO of 400 and 2500. So I will lock into one of those, and then I will adjust the exposure with the variable ND. And same thing on the GH5, I'm going to adjust the exposure as much as possible with the variable ND. If I can't and I have to adjust the ISO, then I will, but I will try to leave it at its native so I get the cleanest image possible. So it really just comes down to what I'm shooting. But the default settings on my cameras, I think it's set to 400. Yeah, I have it default locked in at, in using the C settings, the custom function settings, I have it locked in at 400. So whenever I turn the camera on, it's there. But I also know that it's a very quick bump of the thumb dial, right? I have the camera set so that my ISO is on here on this command dial in the back. So I know that when it's at 400, it's just a very quick, like one flick, and it's going to drop it down to ISO. So if I need to go automatic, it's just boom, and I'm ready to go. So that's kind of my default position, if you will. All right. Hope that was helpful to you. Trevor says, which do you use more, focus peaking in camera or good quality external monitor? Oh, focus peaking in camera for sure. I don't shoot with an external monitor very often. If I'm doing any kind of run and gun stuff, I'd rather not have an external monitor if I can help it. And so the vast majority of the time I don't have one on there. So even if I had I do have a small one, a little 5-inch one, which we've looked at on the show before a little bit, and that's something I will be doing more on in the very near future, actually. That's awesome, but it's still another piece onto the camera. It's not very conducive to kind of vlogging style. I just want to carry this camera around all day long. In that case, I'm definitely going to use focus peaking. So yeah, I use focus peaking more. And even if I was using an external monitor, I would probably still use focus peaking. I would just have it on the external monitor because focus peaking is awesome. You really, really get to see what's in focus. Stuart says, going back to an old subject, how did you get on with the Godox flash equipment while you're away, and what did you think of it? Okay, so interesting question. I had been trying to get Godox I was trying to get them to be an official sponsor of the photo walk that I did. Complicated company, apparently. Never happened. But I ended up picking up a couple of Godox lights at B&H while I was there, part of my loaning program. I didn't buy them, I just borrowed them from B&H. And I've still got them, and I loved them, actually. They're really easy to use, really easy to set up. The command module that you put on the camera gives you total control over them. It was awesome. So I will be doing a show on that before I leave for India. So sometime in the next couple of weeks, I will do a deep dive into that. I used them on the photo walk in New York, and they were perfect. They worked great. So I like them. I like them a lot, and you can't beat the price. So I will continue. I will do another show on that. Right? We'll do a show on that coming up here over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, they're good lights. I like them a lot. Bing says, another question. Do you set the angle to 360 for low light or night video? So yes, if I am shooting very low light and I don't have a whole lot of movement happening, then yes, I will go ahead and open up the shutter angle to 360. So for anyone, actually if anyone's not sure about shutter angle and how that works, we'll link to a video up here that will explain all that. I did a video on that a little while ago, so we'll link to that one up here. But yes, I will open it up to 360, which is opening up all the way. That is the maximum exposure you could have at any setting to do that. So yeah, I got no problem doing that. Absolutely not. Tyler says, how do you set the rotation function on the back dial on the GH5? I wanted to set that to aperture for so long. Ooh, I think you can set it to aperture. Let's see here. Does this camera have a battery in it? Let's turn this on and see. This one, oh, it does. Okay, so let me, what's the best way to do this? Let me swap these out. And grab this cable here. And I will show you where it is. It'll take me a moment to find it, but we'll get there. Oops, that's the wrong side. And that is too short of, why that cable gets so short? All right. Here, so this is the GH5S, but it's going to be the same on the GH5 or the G9. And I don't remember if you can change that on any other cameras, if you can take control of that command dial in the back. Okay, so let's do this, and oop, that has to be set. Hold on, give me 1 second. I got to turn something else on in here so you can actually see the menu, which is, where's that setting? I always forget what that setting is. Here, somewhere down here. No, it's not there. It's under here. It's the setting that allows the information to get sent out. No, it's not there. It's sent out over the HDMI. Here we go. HDMI record output, info display on. Now you should see it. There we go. Okay. So what we're looking for is, I think under operation, function button. It's not function button set, is it? Record. No, it's not under the function buttons. Where? Dial set. Yep, there we go. Dial set, control dial. So the control dial is the one on the back. You can set it to, I guess you can't set it to aperture. So there's different modes you're in. So it's showing you here when you're in program, aperture, shutter, or manual, what it's going to do. I have it set to ISO. You can set it to focus frame size, exposure compensation, or, there we go, aperture when in manual mode. So if you set it here, then when you're in manual exposure, not in aperture, shutter, or program, which is odd, I must say. It's a little odd. But when you're in manual mode, that will change the aperture. That appears to be the only place that that will do that. So there you go. Let me back out of that again. You are in the custom wrench menu, so the C menu. Go to Operation, go to Dial Set, and then scroll down to Control Dial Assignment, and that's the one that you are looking for. Let's see, is this anything here? Nope, no. Yeah, that's what you want right there. So there you go. There's the setting. Sorry, that is kind of odd that you can't just do aperture all the time. Because you would think in this situation, I would want to have aperture on for aperture priority. But anyway, that's the way it is. So that's where the setting is. So if it's not exactly what you're looking for, I'm sorry, but that is what we've got. All right. And Tyler says close enough. Excellent. Okay, any other questions in here? Nothing else? Let's make sure I didn't miss anything earlier on. And then we are going to bail out of here. That is it. Nope, that's it. All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in today. It was, as always, fun to have you on the show. We will do on Wednesday. You know what, I think I will do this on Wednesday because I need to do this now. So this is, we talked about this very briefly, this Portkeys 5-inch monitor, this one I was just referencing. I hadn't been able to do the full video because they had not sent out the most important piece of this thing called the long arm that apparently will allow me to control the camera from the screen at a distance. Interesting concept. That part has arrived. I have not yet opened it, so maybe I'll do that on Wednesday. If not, I got a couple of other products here that are waiting for me to talk about, so we'll do one of them. Wednesday's going to be a product show. All right, guys, take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.